All right, I think we're going to kick this off. Excellent. So first, a very big thank you to all of you, our attendees who are joining us today. We really do appreciate you choosing to spend this hour with us. We know that your time is valuable and you could be spending it in many other places, so we really do thank you. And we wanted to let you know that you are in very good company. How so? Well, actually, we wanted to give you some insights as to who the audience is today. And actually, we have quite a global audience. Today, we have 4 continents represented, as well as almost a dozen time zones. So really, the globe is covered. And I did want to say, for all of you who are at happy hour right now, enjoy. And to those who are not, well, remember happy hour somewhere. But in seriousness, your peers today represent professionals across university departments and diverse nonprofits, both big and small. Whether you're in the nascent stages of your strategy or consider yourself really an expert, we hope our discussion today will inspire new and innovative approaches to your fundraising. So, before we jump in, we would like to just give you a few housekeeping items. We're recording this session and are going to make it available today. Our session will consist of a moderated discussion for about 30 minutes before we break into Q&A. At any point during the discussion, we encourage you to take advantage of our expert panelists and ask questions about your fundraising efforts or any discussion points. So please submit your questions via the Q&A tab, and we'll do our best to address them at the end of the presentation. Now, let's introduce our distinguished speakers. First, Brandon. Brandon is the Director of Marketing Operations and Annual Giving at the University of Notre Dame. He is a marketing solutionist, a storyteller, and a lover of all things digital. We're so lucky to work with you, Brandon, and excited to have you with us. I'd also like to introduce Usha, who is the Chief Product Officer for Hivebrite and President of our North American operations. She's passionate about building high-performing teams and a product culture that focuses on outcomes, not features. Usha, is a pleasure to have you join us today. Thank you so much. All right, we're gonna get rolling into our questions. The first one is for Brandon. Brandon, we have quite a diverse audience with us today, and we know that not one university or nonprofit is really the same. So we'd love to hear what's the specific mission for Notre Dame's donations department, and how is your strategy supporting this?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for letting me be here today. I'm really pumped, and I hope we have a lot of fun. Notre Dame's kind of central mission, summarized, is to be a force for good in the world, period, which is really exciting. It's a really exciting mission to be a part of. And we're a private university. So all of our funding has to come from, philanthropy from alumni, parents, and friends of the university so that we can achieve that mission. And, our goals look different every year, and there's different things we're trying to fund to advance this mission at Notre Dame. But the common theme that I see year over year is really centrally been around financial aid. And it's really important to Notre Dame for us to make sure that if you are a student who can be accepted into Notre Dame and you kind of fit our mission, vision, and values, that we make it possible for you to attend regardless of your financial situation.
I know, Usha, I think you had a few thoughts that you wanted to share as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it would be great also, Brandon, to hear about, about your strategy and other things as part of this. But, as you were talking, I just realized we are a tech company, right? We are a tech startup, and we are, so like all other tech companies, we operate in an agile fashion. We are an agile development shop. And, we understand what an agile operating model looks like. And there's usually 5 things that stand out in the most successful agile organizations. There's strategy. So, and that all starts with a shared vision, which is very, very clear, that has action that's associated with actionable goals, with priorities, and with really clarity on what everyone in the organization needs to do. You talked about your vision right up front. That's the first thing you just talked about. The second thing that I see as, representative of highly successful agile organizations is a structure that's conducive to being agile. So what I mean by that is having teams that are autonomous, which are able to, conduct decision making on their own. They have clear accountability, they have roles, they have a governance model that enables that type of behavior. And I think it would be great to hear from you how you guys are organized to enable that. The third thing that I see in successful companies is process. And while there's standard ways of doing work, you also need to allow to be agile, to allow for rapid cycles of innovation, thinking and doing, strong results orientation, continuous improvement, hypothesis testing, experimentation. And that's sort of a defining characteristic that I see in many of these organizations. Of course, team comes next, and that's probably the most important. Having people who are passionate, who ignite passion, and they drive and foster a culture of collaboration and reward. And of course, the last and most defining characteristic is the use of technology. They leverage technology, to support these capabilities, to drive this type of cadence within the organization. It's seamlessly integrated into their operating model. Now, we've partnered with Notre Dame for some time now, and when I look at you as an organization, you stand out and you really exemplify all these aspects of what agile, best-in-class agile organizations typically have. And I feel that's a core part of how you drive success year over year and improvement year over year in what you do. So it would be great. I know you have a lot of examples to share with us today, but it would be great if you do that, give us real life examples and scenarios of how you really embody all these principles of being agile. It's great to have you here, Brandon, and great to be chatting with you in this setting.
Yeah, this is wonderful. Yeah, I think let's talk about organizational structure. I think one thing that's unique at Notre Dame is our development and fundraising operation is centralized at the university, where you'll see a lot of other universities, they have in different colleges and departments fundraising roles. And for us, we find that people's love for Notre Dame and our university is they have there's many points that they love, right? Whatever their affiliation could be, but there's this central I just love this place. So what we want to do in our organization is really create these verticals of excellence. So we have fundraising staff, direct line fundraisers who are all working in the same vertical and collaborating with each other, and they have their vision really set, and they're really good. And then we do that the same kind of thing with annual giving operations and kind of the digital marketing, digital philanthropy, that sort of thing. And so you've got this high net worth kind of category, you've got this kind of grassroots category, and then there's tons of supporting verticals within there. But we're all central, and that really helps us get a great sense of community, that we can go rally around this cause together, and everybody's on the same page at all time. And I think it really helps drive our annual strategy as well. So specifically in my area that I'm in is kind of our annual giving operation. And we spend a lot of time developing strategy that we're trying to get people to think about giving to Notre Dame and then renewing that gift. So I think when you talk about this agile kind of process, one of the things that we have to do is we have to be very smart about our goals increase every year. And I think a lot of every nonprofit, when you believe in your cause, you want to do everything you can for that cause, and you want to do more and more. So we know that what we do today, we can't just repeat it next year, because we would be trying to get the same result. So we always have to look at what can we do better every single year to find that incremental growth to help fulfill the mission of Notre Dame.
Thanks. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's fascinating to hear how your teams work in tandem, your annual strategies, and also this continuous iteration to improve year over year. And that leads really interestingly into this next question, because this past year in specific, we've really experienced an unprecedented time during the ongoing pandemic, and I'm sure it's been top of mind for so many of us. It's been affecting us in our lives, our businesses, and more. And I'm sure so many of us on the call are curious about how COVID has really impacted donations strategy at Notre Dame and kind of those learnings. What have you changed, if anything?
Yeah, we spent a period of time where we just kind of went quiet, and I think we all just kind of like, we're trying to figure out what's going to happen in the world, and we wanted to be really sensitive to how people were dealing with the pandemic, and really trying to figure out like what's the right thing to do, right now. And we came to a point where we were like, this goes back to our roots. Like we heard from students and families that said, I lost my job. I can't support you, but I lost my job, and my students' financial aid situation is now different. They have more need today than they did a month ago. What do I do? And it became really clear to us that we had to double down on supporting students and financial aid. So we went out and we made our case, and what we like to think about it as is unlocking the grace of giving to Notre Dame. Like, giving is not for us, we don't want to just say just make a gift and it's done. Like, that gift, we want to make you feel and understand that it really means something. And what blew my mind, when we look at the numbers and we look at open rates and we do all that stuff, it's like just pause. People in this time where everything in the world is telling you to protect what you have, to hold what's closest to you, like even closer, and it's scary. We saw that people were opening up and saying, I have something that and I want to help somebody else. $5, $500, anything, right? And we got really motivated. That was like, we were thinking, my gosh, people are in, and they want to help. And so we just, like I said, we doubled down on supporting students. And from that, we saw an acceleration of giving during this COVID era that blew our minds. And so our messaging was really consistent. We like to say, here's our need, here's what your gift will do, and then we want to tell you about the impact that gift had. And so we changed our strategy. We changed a lot of the seasonality of our strategy, and we just shuffled some things around. And we're seeing almost 100% increase in online giving this year over last year, an average of 240 online gifts per day. Wow. People want to create an impact and give and support others when they have that. And it really left us with this taste of like this community, like rallying around our mission. Like, we rallied the Notre Dame community for the Notre Dame community, and we were just left in awe and inspired, and just truly grateful for what people chose to do for Notre Dame and our students.
Thank you, Brandon. This is incredible. Really, I love this phrase, the unlocking the grace of giving, and people really rallying behind creating an impact together, big or small, right? Understanding truly the genuine need from the community and wanting to give back. It's so wonderful to see how that happened within Notre Dame.
Yeah, and also I think what's interesting is also that we went through a similar experience at Hivebrite, right, Lucia? We hunkered down, we went quiet for a period of time, and then we saw a similar thing happening in the market where people were seeking us out because we were able to enable them to find ways to engage and drive their missions, even in these difficult times. So it's the rallying around the mission and then driving that. So we feel similarly fortunate to be in the situation that we are in.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Usha. I think probably so many of us on the call experience this kind of similar situation. So being in the same boat, I think we're all excited to be able to impact in our own ways. And that being said, I'm wondering, what else have you seen just generally in the nonprofit communities that we've been working, maybe would be interesting to share, right, during this time of COVID?
Yeah, I mean, I think I know many of you belong to nonprofits here in this webinar today. So I'm sure you're familiar with the term the donor pyramid, right? And I'm also sure you've heard about people talking about flipping this pyramid upside down. So you approach it more like a donor funnel. And that's like almost like a marketing funnel that you can think about in the for-profit world. And perhaps, thinking about it that way made a lot of sense when you had to rely on offline means to cultivate your donors, or, you had to use email marketing, which is more like one-way communications with your donors. But what we are seeing is there's been a shift to online communities, and you don't have to think about it in that linear or sequential a manner anymore. And so, we are seeing that there is a rise in like Brandon said, there is a rise or an increase in the number of one-time donations. And that's because online engagement you can go and have a low touch engagement model with your donors, and you can still be as impactful, you can still be as direct and still be as meaningful in engaging with that segment of your audience. And so it doesn't matter where they belong in the donor pyramid, you can actually start to get them to participate in many ways early on in that donor cycle. And if you think about fundraising in a much more broader sense, not just from a giving perspective, what we are seeing is also there's a lot of what I would call as contextual donations happening. And what that means is people seek out each other. They want to come and sort of participate in events on an online community platform like Hivebrite. But as they're doing that, then they'll go and write a small check to support the operations of their clubs and groups, for example. So like this goes back to the point that Brandon was making earlier, that people want to help in this time of need in whatever way they can. And that can help you spearhead some of your own fundraising initiatives. And the last thing I'll say is on specifically to your question, Lucia, about what are you seeing during COVID? I'm seeing that big gifts or major donors are also writing checks online, basically giving online. Now, I don't know if that's a permanent trend and if that's going to stay, or if it's going to sort of morph into something which is more of an hybrid online, offline type of behavior. But we're definitely seeing a lot of that as well.
That's fascinating. Yeah, this real, true, genuine desire to connect to the community and remain connected and give is really there. And I think what COVID has done, and it happens through every kind of difficult time, most likely is what opportunities and learnings arise from those difficult times, and really how to innovate in the age of digitalization is most one of the largest things it sounds like that's coming to pass as a result of learnings from COVID. And so I'd love to talk a little bit more about that. And maybe Brandon, this is where I'll turn it back to you, because it sounds like this new landscape is providing us opportunities to innovate, very much so digitally, drive increased giving, especially for institutions where that connection to the community and the mission is very strong. So I'm curious, Brendan, what specifically are you doing digitally to drive those increased connections and an extension giving? And what are maybe some of the tactics, more of these examples that you've talked about at the beginning that you could share with us?
Oh yeah, this stuff, I get so fired up. I get so fired up about this. So when we were sensitive to fundraising, the first thing we thought was like Notre Dame is the destination for a lot of people. They come here for like either like sporting events, for like reasons related to their faith. As just, it's wild. People just love this place. And we can't travel. You can't come here, like we can't visit you. All that stuff went away. And so we wanted to bring Notre Dame to the world, wherever they were. So the first thing that we started doing were what we call these live chats. And we started bringing university leaders in to do like a YouTube live stream. And we're just going to talk for 40 minutes. And we bring the athletics director and like, tell us about what sports could look like during the pandemic and after the pandemic, and what does that mean for Notre Dame, and what does that mean for the industry? And we have thousands of people tune in. We're like, oh my gosh, well, let's try this again. Let's bring the president of the university to say, talk about like what the university might look like after this. And then we were getting so much feedback where the Notre Dame family, as we call them, were saying, hey, I would love to hear more about students like seeking jobs, recent graduates or seniors who might be looking for jobs. So we brought leadership from our career center to talk about that. And we invited, initially, we had invited like a segmented group of some like annual donors who are, pretty loyal to giving annually to Notre Dame. And we told them in those invitations, like, we're inviting you because you have loyally given to Notre Dame. We want you to have access to this content. We slowly opened it up more broadly. And then we started thinking, well, instead of emailing people and telling them to come watch this live stream, let's also get in their social feeds. So we started this kind of practice of ramping up our storytelling strategy on our social media channels, and we've seen great growth from it. Not only from like these live streams and like learn about what's happening in Notre Dame and what our leadership thinks about the market and this sort of thing. There was also just like feel good stories. That simple, because we're all on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and in 2020 with coronavirus and politics, all you get to see is coronavirus and politics, and it gets exhausting. So we kind of created this rule where we want to post daily news and inspiring stories from Notre Dame that make people remember the good in the world and the good that Notre Dame's producing in the world. So we talked about students doing amazing stuff, or like research that's happening and cancer research that's happening on campus, and different academic disciplines on campus, and like great things that they're doing there. And we saw great engagement from it. So it became like this really fun thing for us. We kind of went from fundraising to just engagement and storytelling. And we built an even bigger audience than we had before. And that turns into, once folks are engaged and they believe in you and they love you and they feel good about this place, like they could be potential donors. Once we started getting back into solicitations, for us, it all comes back to segmentation. And the number one rule for us is, who's your audience, and what do you want them to think, feel, or do? So we identified core audiences that we targeted differently, and we felt like we understood what they were passionate about. So when we look at like what channels we're going to use to reach people, and we drive donors from either social media to an online giving experience, or from email to an online giving experience, or even a phone call talking to somebody and saying like, are you in? Like, do you want to help these students? Like, can you help? And they say, I'm in. What do I do? We drive them online. We would send them to different destinations. And I think there's I think there's a slide. If we could pull up the parents slide. So here's an example of, we asked Notre Dame, the current parents of Notre Dame students, for a gift. And that's kind of crazy right now, because they're likely paying tuition and they're thinking, I don't want to support financial aid, but that's not our ask. So what we do is we'll talk to parents and we'll say, like, your student is on campus and thriving, and we want to keep, like we have a lot of policies in place that say we can't have these large gatherings and groups and things like that. And we're spending tons of money trying to reshape how campus looks now in this era of COVID. But we have ideas for how we can make the student experience better. And parents, could you help invest in the student experience here at Notre Dame? And in exchange, since we know you love being a Notre Dame parent and you love showing that off, we'd love to send you this ND parent pennant in exchange for a gift. So when you are back in the office, you can hang that up and show off your affiliation. And so what we did in that case is we drove parents to a single designation giving form with this promotional offer. And all they have to do is just say their amount, they put in their information and submit their gift, and it's done. And it was successful. Like they loved it. And it all started in this case, knowing knowing your audience and what they care about. I think like
Brandon,
another.
I love.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I absolutely love the story. For me, it's really, one, bringing Notre Dame to the world and then being able to utilize that by listening to what it is that potential donors, right, are interested in, how they want to connect, how they want to engage with the community. For me, it's fascinating, one, because you've now enlarged your pool, you're getting smarter in terms of the donor base, you're tweaking all strategies and making them very personalized in many ways to those actual donors themselves, and giving them transparency too about where their giving is going. I'm curious because there's potentially hundreds, thousands of donors that you need to connect with. And as a result of that, being able to tell those stories in a very targeted fashion must mean that you're utilizing quite a bit of intellect and intelligence from data, or a variety of tool sets, right, to help you kind of build your stories at scale, and also at the same time hit the relevant audiences for particular strategies throughout the year. So I'm wondering if maybe you could talk to us a little bit more about how you do that and structure that and execute, how your teams execute that. Are there specific resources that you utilize? And how
Yeah, I
do they
mean,
help?
before, if I could quickly chime in, I think the
Yeah.
words that really jumped out to me in what Brandon was talking about before was storytelling. It's unbelievable how good you guys have gotten at that. And I remember the campaign that you guys ran I think it was the late summer, right, Brandon, the fight that ran for over, what was it, a 12-hour campaign or something like that, live, where you broadcast your leadership from your campus. And then what I found fascinating there, talking about storytelling, is not just the stories that people who are creating this, like people in your alums or distinguished alums or your leadership talked about, but I also heard a lot of stories coming directly from students and people who would be beneficiaries of this of the funds that you raise, and how it directly impacts them in their day-to-day life. And I thought that was really powerful, and it was sort of quite candid, and people, it wasn't like you were doing a lot of editing there. It was just people coming and talking and speaking their minds, and that felt so like real. And I'm sure that drew a lot of parents in particular to come and donate. And that goes back to that topic I was saying before, which is the small gifts are on the rise. I mean, imagine if you're a parent. I mean, I have a college going son. If I sat in one of those type of events, I would write a gift or a small check right away, just hearing what the kids are able to do with the dollars that you're able to provide.
Yeah, so love this, a fun example, the fight. It's just this crazy idea.
Yeah,
And
that was amazing.
and we know, like, we're always talking about financial aid, but we also have this huge population of student athletes, and most people in America know Notre Dame as a big football school, and athletics is like really kind of central to our identity and a lot of our traditions. But we knew that we needed to support these student athletes as well as they're going through this time with what we call grants and aid, which is essentially a fancy term for financial aid for student athletes. So there's just this idea, like, there's so much cool stuff that they're doing. Like these students and these student athletes and former student athletes and coaches, they're brilliant. And they're doing all this great stuff in the world. Like, we have to tell these stories. We just have this itch. We're like, we got to talk about it. So we created this like live stream event called The Fight. And because we are known as the Fighting Irish. And it is really just this live stream production where we had a couple anchors, and we did like, tons of, in this case, it was a bunch of Zoom calls, much like this. And we just streamed it live. And if you can see in the example on the screen, we asked people to please give to the Rockney Athletics Fund in support of these amazing students. But the content of that live stream was all amazing stories of just brilliant student athletes and successes in sport, and former national champions talking about this one moment in a game that the Notre Dame fans like we'll talk about for 30 years. And so in this case, our audience was the Notre Dame family, especially those with an interest in athletics. And the stories, like I told you, it was just these students and former students are amazing in sport and in the world, and you can help shape the experience for the next generation of them by just giving something, you know. And for that, we just built this destination. It was this a giving form where you could watch the live stream and you could scroll down and put in $5, $25, whatever. And we had multiple designations in this case where you could choose, I want to give to women's soccer or baseball or softball or football. And all of these funds then went to support student athletes within that sport. And it was just it was a great amount of fun. But I get that there's not a lot of value for somebody when you say, hey, can you make a gift? It's like, you want me to like stop what I'm doing and go to your site, and like, am I going to be able to figure out how to give? Like, you got to pull out a credit card. It's just like, I don't want to do that. But if we can say, we have something really valuable for you here. We have all this great content and all these stories, and like, we'd love to show you, and that's totally free. And that's fine if you don't give. We just want you to hear these stories. Once they're there, it's much easier, right? And we hope to inspire you and unlock that grace of giving to Notre Dame, because you'll understand more clearly what it really means to help somebody else in the way that we're asking.
Yeah, it's very impactful, Brendan, because you truly come back to this concept of feeling genuinely connected to the institution, to those who you're giving to, this transparency, this understanding of I'm creating impact, and this continues to create this ongoing relationship that you foster. I'm curious, because we have so many different types of institutions with us today, and those of us who may be just starting out on their journeys, right, in giving, or much more mature, is there feedback that you have, advice that you have for anyone along the journey, insights in terms of resources, tactics, data, how they connect with donors? Does it matter large or small? I'm just curious.
I really think it's the same. Like, if you really need to just start with, and this is internally for your like internal team, and this is externally. You need to have it's data, technology, and storytelling. So data drives who you connect with and why and how you connect with them. Technology really drives how that now digital relationship feels. Is it personal? Is it frictionless? And then stories drive the why someone should listen, engage, and consider giving. And then internally, data, the tools we use need to make collecting and harnessing data really easy. And then the tools we use need to make our digital relationship flourish and delight in the same way that our personal relationships could. And the tools we use also have to help us tell the stories that we want to tell. Just in the same way I had that example, like, we want to do a live stream event where people can give, and we want to tell all these great stories. We want to understand who the donors are. We need to be able to collect gifts if they do it. We need to be able to have a frictionless experience. Like, that's an example of how we check the box on all three of those. But I think paramount to all that is being just donor centric and frankly donor obsessed. You want to, right? You want to understand your donor and foster sustainable relationships and retention regardless of size. And earlier when we talked about being agile, what we have to be careful of is we don't want to create an event that is just like, we're going to do this year, and then we're going to do that same event next year, and then the same event next year, and the same event next year, if we don't have a retention plan for these people. So we want to really understand these donors and move them along the donor life cycle. So it's not like, Usha, you're invited to this event this year and next year and next year, and then the year that you don't show up to the event, our number, we're down. So I think in addition to that, it's just continuing to tell your stories in a genuine way. Is this a good time? Should I talk about like storytelling?
This is always a great time. Please do. I'm fascinated by all of these strategies. And
I think strategies change. Every organization is going to have different goals that they're trying to hit, and it calls for a different strategy every time. But we have this storytelling process that we operate with to define every strategy. And once we have data collected and we're ready to harness it, and we know what technology we're going to use and what we're able to do with that technology, it comes down to, what do we do now? So the first thing we do is we look at who is our audience. And in the example I showed earlier, it's Notre Dame parents, for example. And then the question is now, number two, what are the walkaways? What do we want these parents to think, feel, or do? And that answer looks different based on every segment. But the example I could give for parents is we want them to think that there is a place for them to give at Notre Dame that could and feel like it could support my student and my student's friends. And the do is, and I should give and make, I should give and have that impact at Notre Dame. We look at channels, number three. So audience, walkaways, and then channels. How are we reaching parents? We know that parents are big on social media and they like to open emails. And great. So we know that those are two marketing channels we're going to use. We kind of define some metrics as step 4 to say, like, what would great look like? Like if we received 30 gifts from this parent audience, is that good or bad? And then we look at stories. That's number 5. And so this is the beauty of how it all ties together. What stories can we tell audience, parents, that will make them think, feel, or do what we want them to think, feel, or do through that channel? And when we put this audience, walkaways, channels, define what great looks like, and then stories, that is the recipe that we run all of our concepts through, and then try ideas.
This is incredible information. I think, in terms of being able to connect the think, feel, or do, and really segmenting, understanding that, and having that continuous relationship with the donor, because as we were talking about before, we mentioned we will have some of these ways in which we rally together. Maybe there's an event, giving promotion, a strategy, but then there's that continuous connection that an individual will feel to the community over the lifetime with yourself as an organization, or their lifetime. So it's really going back to that connection, that mission that they're feeling, and then utilizing all those data and insights to segment and target them at the right times, but then have them feel connected through a thread throughout their lifetime with that community. And I'd love to also ask Usha a bit in terms of what she's seeing with regards to how that connection and that engagement, perhaps with other nonprofits that she's working with, has evolved too. How are they looking at data and insights, creating those genuine connections to the community, thinking about their audiences, and getting them to continuously feel engaged throughout the relationship?
Yeah, sure. It's amazing how, there are certain words that Brandon uses, which I hear everywhere, right? Make it personal, tell your stories, make it frictionless, make it repeatable. So it's not, now if I go back to the donor pyramid, there's the one-time gifts, and then there's the annual gifts. How do you get people to give annually? You want to tell them stories that bring them back over and over again, or provide them value of some sort. But I'll say that one thing I'll say is, do not underestimate the power of your community, right? They can really become your field organization that fuels your fundraising programs. And I'll take 2 examples of other Hivebrite customers in the nonprofit space. One of them is called One Child, and they are a faith-based organization, and they provide what's called as child sponsorships using Hivebrite as a community engagement platform. And essentially, child sponsorship has been around for over 100 years, right? Child sponsors or champions, it's about helping them select a child and provide monthly payment to fund that child's development and progression and career opportunities. And the process traditionally would happen in a very sort of offline way through physical letters, and turnaround times would take months. And the sponsor would not even hear about who is the child they're sponsoring, what are they doing, what progress is happening. There were really no digital touches. Now, what One Child is doing now with a community like Hivebrite is they're creating a community between their champions, who are their sponsors, and the Hope Center staff that can help them improve this process and effectively increase sponsorships in the process. So, right, this allows them to increase those digital touches, motivate people and drive that intent to give back, not just once, but over and over again. Right. The other thing that they're doing is actually they're using this community to then educate their Hope Center staff, to learn more and support each other and solve each other's problems. I mean, a problem in Ethiopia and how they're dealing with COVID in these Hope Centers was an example that Steve at One Child specifically gave me. And they're using the community to basically share this type of insight and knowledge amongst their caregivers. That becomes more transparent then to the sponsors because they're on the same platform. And these stories then create a greater impact and draws even more sponsors. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling kind of thing when you try to bring all of these people who are both the beneficiaries as well as the givers all onto the same platform. Another example that comes to mind is a community called Girl Up. They are part of the United Nations Foundation. They recently selected Hivebrite. We're honored to power, their mission, which is to empower girls to promote the cause of gender equality across the entire globe. And how they do this through 3,000 clubs that are spread across high schools, through college campuses, local communities, and this gives youth at a very young age to engage, create their own clubs, and they run programs that change the world. And all of them come back and tell stories. And these stories then enable Melissa, who's the executive director over there, and her team to then go and be able to seek out funds from companies and sponsors that can then come back and provide that type of support and further enhance the goals of the community. So that's what I'll leave you with. I think you should really consider making community building and engagement a cornerstone of your fundraising strategy, and that will help you not just launch it but also sustain it and then ultimately grow it to what you need it to be in the long run.
Yeah, it sounds like there is just this complete interconnected link between giving and community, and one is actually very much so part of the other.
Absolutely. Engagement drives participation, and that we are seeing that in the data, right? Brandon, you'll probably be able to speak to that a lot more.
Yeah, the beauty, and I love those causes, and they've got this really clear focus, and they can go fundraise for that. The challenge we have in higher ed is, like any school, do you love the school in general? Do you love this? Was your experience shaped because you were a part of this college or this department or this major or that student activity or that sport? And so what you have to do is you've got to understand, obviously in collecting the data, but you've got to understand people's affiliations and then build that community around those affiliations, the things that make them, it's like part of their identity. So at Notre Dame, we see people, let's say Ohio State University, students might identify themselves as I'm a such and such major. At Notre Dame, it's by the residence hall. They always talk about what residence hall they're in. And then when you graduate, people will talk about the residence hall and then their class year. And some people don't care about class year. Some people are like, I was a part of this one club, and that's where I made all my friends. And so if you build all these little communities within this larger kind of Notre Dame community, you start to find people's passion points, and then you can unlock the grace of giving to that cause. If you loved your residence hall and that experience shaped you, it is in need of renovation. It's a 100-year-old building. We could use some funds to help, transform this place for the next generation of students. And that would resonate with that person more than something else. So by offering these communities to people and seeing where they kind of naturally go, you can really learn a lot about who your audiences are.
Thank you, Brandon. I think actually we've reached the point where we're going to start taking some questions from the audience. This has been such a riveting discussion. We could probably go on for quite a bit more, but I definitely want to have some time to answer some questions from our audience today, if that's okay with both of you, Usha and Brandon.
Sure.
Excellent. All right. So we have a question actually, since we definitely, as we mentioned, have quite a global audience on today, which is really exciting. Someone is asking us about donations from alumni across the world. How have you brought alumni across the world together? Perhaps you could give more feedback on if there's anything unique, especially during this past year, that have helped you rally alumni outside of the US.
Yeah, we went all digital. It's expensive to send mail internationally, and especially in the COVID era, there was a lot of restrictions on sending mail from country to country. And then you'd see these hangups in if you make an ask to somebody and then they send a check back and it's lost. So what we had done was we had gone strictly digital, but we had to make sure that we're on a platform that supports collecting data from any country in the world, and also supporting payment types from, like there's credit card restrictions. So like we wanted to make sure that we had that all in place, and we did. And then we just put together that kind of digital strategy. And we like to acknowledge when people are living internationally. We like to relate back to, here's what's happening on campus. We know you're far away, but we hope Notre Dame is still in your heart. You sure are in our hearts and minds. So that's kind of the messaging that we go with.
Yeah, perfect. And Usha, I'm just curious, because we at Hivebrite, we work with so many communities that are global in nature, and building that community both globally and obviously domestically, I think we've seen in so many cases is also really important, since right now people have been actually no longer at their home stations, but perhaps they're now homes is somewhere else. So I'm curious if your thoughts on really connecting people globally and how that's maybe impacted what we've seen in terms of community.
Yeah, I mean, even prior to COVID, we started to see that, right? Community is just becoming a new way for people to drive, to get together and congregate in a safe and private space where they have something to share and give and learn. So I think that just from, again, I go back to the donor journey standpoint. Once they start finding value in the community, then they start to give, no matter what part of the world they are in, because they relate to the cause. I mean, take Fulbright scholarships, for example. Alumni from Fulbright, come out of that program and they go to all parts of the world. They are spread over 90 commissions, but they don't just engage within their commissions. They engage for the causes that they believe in. If they believe in sustainability, you'll see someone in the US collaborating with someone in the Far East who is doing that. So, and then when that sense of community and those bonds form, I think then you can drive fundraising across borders effectively, without really thinking about tailoring your message for a geographic area. You could, you strike the chord in terms of the topic that most interests them.
Yeah, this is fabulous. It's probably one of the opportunities that has come out where we've now have even more of a reason to be meeting people who with similar interests that want to create impact across borders. And now even more than before, we get the opportunity to do that. Another question has come in, and I think this is also going to be for both of you. How have you, or actually this is for Brandon, how have you evaluated your tech needs for your alumni audiences and for your own team? Was there any specific process or items that you would suggest?
Yeah, I think a lot of it goes back to my comment about your ability to collect data. So we need the ability to collect data. We need the ability to execute our strategy with that technology. And part of that evaluation process is, you need something that's data collection is secure. You need robust features that are configurable for your needs, for your organization. You need to be able to scale. Once you start hitting gold with a strategy, you're like, oh my gosh, let's do this more, and more and more and more. And I think platform stability is big. If you have a strategy that's getting a lot of traction, you can't crash. So for us, it was really, we wanted to look for a partner that was developing for tomorrow and not just for today. So you want to find a partner for your technology that is really visionary in the same way that you have to be visionary with executing your strategy. They need to be aligned. Absolutely. I hope that answers the question.
I think so, and this might actually lead into some other questions here that are very good and perhaps can actually help inform some of that. One individual had asked about doubling down on online donations and how you had picked specific. Were there any specific channels that you focused on? How you focused on them? Was there any specific content that worked best, and how did you select that content? I know this actually goes back into some of the things we've already discussed, but maybe it leads into a specific example, or how you've combined, insights from data and tech to be able to inform you of the content or the channels that you look to reach individuals on.
Sure. A lot of our strategy is we will take, for example, audience A, and we will have this plan to send them, let's say, 4 emails over the next 6 months or 3 months or whatever. And we'll try to tell a story that we think will work. And for the folks who donate, they kind of drop off, and we will have this kind of central theme. If it's like students are in need, and we're raising money for financial aid, we'll have some underlying content with that. And if that doesn't work, the next email they get will be a little bit of a change up. And we'll often test, like A/B test subject lines and content to see what's performing better. And we continue to work that. But it's always just testing. That really drives a lot of the content and the narrative that we're trying to tell. But always at the end of the day, we want to communicate. I think it's really important that you don't just communicate why you're asking for a gift, but exactly how that gift will be used and the impact of it. And then once that impact has come to fruition, tell that donor what their gift did. Like, go back and tell them and say, like, hey, remember 5 months ago when you made this gift? Here's what it did. Thank you for that. Like, we're so grateful that you were a part of this. And then a year later, like, you've got somebody who's probably like more engaged with you now that they know that it meant something.
And also, I think that reminds me, Brandon, you've talked to us in the past about the stewardship activities that you guys do, right? To then bring it all back together for them as well. Can you share a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, fun stuff. Like, we'll send out, anytime somebody joins one of our recognition societies or giving societies, we always have some sort of stewardship program that's running. A lot of stories from students, stories of like the impact of that gift, and we'll do that stuff quarterly. We found that like the kind of lower tier donations, people prefer to hear from us quarterly, but we always just throw in value. And I love when you talked about the international communities early, because you talked about, like, I was thinking of like the Notre Dame Club of London. Those people are so far from campus, but like they still feel connected to Notre Dame because they have each other. We try to do that, even if like our content can't all be giving related. So one example is we just started doing a cooking show where we take some of the executive chefs on campus. We actually had one who won a contest on the Food Network on TV, and we just say, like, hey, we're going to teach you how to bake the legendary Notre Dame shortbread cookie. That's it. And we just had like this fun 2-hour cooking show, and hundreds of people tuned in. And I don't think they're cooking along with it, but it's cool because they're engaged. They get to see the personality of Notre Dame. They get to have some fun. And then at the end, we send them the recipe that says, here's the recipe for the legendary Notre Dame shortbread cookie. So the next time you're having friends over, or you're on campus for a tailgate party for a football game or whatever, you get to have that little piece of Notre Dame to contribute to the party. and they love it. People were writing in and asking, how do I crack the egg that way? And it's just stuff. But like
That is,
it,
yeah, that is the contextual piece that I was talking about before. That makes so much sense because you're creating a fulfilling experience for the donors themselves, right? And that's encouraging them to give more.
yeah, and it's hard to do that at scale. Like,
Yeah.
how many you have a friend. You don't want to have the friend that's just always like, hey, can you do this for me? Can you do this for me? Can you do this for me? It's like, what do like, what is in it for me? And so that's what we try to answer that question with, just really creative stewardship kind of strategies and just content and ideas like that. And it really makes our jobs a lot more fun, because in the grind of looking at reports and tactics and strategy, you get to mix it up with, let's go bake some cookies. And our teams get really engaged, and we just have a lot of fun.
Can I have a cookie?
And they're so good. They're so good. But I'll tell you, the icing is, it looks easy to do, but it is not.
We have to go find that recipe, Lucia.
Yeah, we do.
Or Hivebrite.
I think, yeah, Hivebrite cookies are in order. We have to figure out how we build engagement around it. Boxed cookie day, maybe. I think we have room for maybe one more question or so, and then unfortunately our discussion has already come close to an end. But there's a couple questions here actually around somewhat of the same premise of institutions being a bit smaller, very lean staff, maybe one or two individuals, lean resources, and or literally starting from zero. And the question being, if I'm starting from basically zero, what would, maybe to Brandon and maybe to Usha as well, what would you do first to spark this engagement, spark the sense of community for giving? First thing you would do?
I would look at who my champions are. Who are like the 5 people who are like, I love this, I can give a little bit. I would make sure that I have a way to collect that data, because I see a lot of nonprofits when they start, you're asking friends and family and extensions of those folks to give, without really a good way of like collecting the data and understanding the why, like why they gave. So I would start there, find my champions, and then I would try to build a community around these people who have identified that they're into this. And then it would go straight to collecting that data, looking at it, and then thinking about what are the stories that I can tell right now about what my small nonprofit, small university, whatever, what's the magic that's happening here that's going to inspire other people to give. And I would keep bringing people in. And I think about it like a restaurant, like we've all gone to these, we've all gone to restaurants, and the waiter or waitress says like, hey, is it the usual? And you're like, yeah, it is. Like, this is my place. And that's so fun when you get that kind of treatment. When you are, it's the funnest spot to be in. If you're just like starting or you're like early in this, get people to feel that way and let them feel like this is a part of their identity. Show them the impact of what they're doing, and they're going to be your champions to go out and spread the word and find that solution that's going to allow you to capture that data and keep learning about people and their intentions over and over and over. And I think that is the best place to start from to scale. It's always being donor-centric, and it's telling the right stories.
Thank you, Brandon. Those are fabulous thoughts. And unfortunately, we've come to our time. It's been so quick. But I just want to ask if yourself or Usha have any parting thoughts for us. Of course, if we haven't gotten to your question, not a problem. We're going to, be able to happy to answer it after this. But any parting thoughts, Usha or Brandon, before we close today?
Well, I think what Notre Dame has done is phenomenal, right? But it didn't happen overnight. And I would just say sustaining that year over year requires a lot of hard work, a lot of passion, a lot of just commitment to the cause, understanding the mission. And they just do it over and over and over again. And every time they run one of these campaigns and share results with us, it makes us proud, because it gives us an opportunity to feel like we are part of, what you're trying to do there. So thank you for giving us that opportunity, Brandon. And you guys, this hopefully is not the first and the last of this type of sharing that you're able to do, I'm sure our customers will have more questions. A lot of them are starting out with engagement first, and then they will progress into fundraising at some point in time. So I think that's also a strategy, by the way. That's what I've seen. There's a pyramid for the donors. There's also a pyramid for engagement, where you start out with inactive users who go up to becoming what we call as newcomers to consumers of information. Then they start to become social and ultimately become contributors. And that goes back to your champions. Those who are contributors tend to become the biggest champions and ultimately, start to give you more and more. So I would just say keep at it, and we are happy to discuss what we are learning from our customers and share with all of you on a one-on-one basis, even after this. But it's just been great to work with Notre Dame through this journey and learn from you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank
And you folks have been awesome partners, and this has been a fun journey for us. We're really grateful that
we're really grateful that
Zoom issues. We're really grateful that you folks have enabled us to execute a lot of these just wild ideas, and it's been really fun. But I'm really grateful for doing this. I'm super appreciative of the participants that have been here today. I wish I could see everybody face to face and just talk shop with everybody, because I think, large or small, we all have the similar challenges, and this is like a fun little community that we formed even just for an hour to talk about stuff that we're all passionate about. So thank you so much, and I hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful day.
Yes. Echoing this, thank you to Brandon so much for being here with us, Usha, all of your insights as well, and to everyone who participated today. We were so excited to have you. We hope to see you at a future webinar. We're always looking to get feedback and to provide you with additional interesting conversations, so please don't hesitate to fill out the survey that we sent to you. Let us know what you'd like to hear, and we hope to see you at the next one. So bye-bye, everyone. Great rest of your day.